Today we are replacing the rear strut assembly for a 2002 Volkswagen Cabrio. This spring is not going to be replaced. Everything else will be. We are going to access the top part of the struts from the back seat, and that is located right behind the back seat, one on the left side and on the right side. As you can see, I have removed the cover, which is to the right of your picture. And actually you're working from, when you're removing from left to right. So there will be a nut on, actually I'm sorry, from right to left. So remove this cover, remove that piece right there, which is a piece of rubber, top nut. Then there's another nut underneath that. You loosen that, take that off also, which is on top of that plate. Then the top bearing and bushing assembly. Okay, and this piece here goes underneath that when you reassemble. You would need to jack this vehicle up in the rear and set it up on jack stands. Make sure the jack stands are free of the rear trailing arm. This arm right here. All right, that runs along here and over to the other side. Once you have done that, you can loosen up your top screws as I have nuts as I showed you earlier, and then this whole assembly would drop down. And then you can come down here and loosen. There's a nut, a bolt going through this point that goes through the bottom of the strut and into a nut that's over here. In this hole, which is in this housing at the bottom of the strut. You would need a 19mm socket to loosen this and a 19mm wrench to go inside of this hole to lock onto that nut. Once you do that, this whole strut assembly should drop out. You actually don't need to take your wheel off. As I didn't do that on this side, but once you have loosened the top and the bottom, it will drop off. It will be free now to work its way. You'll have to work it out of this hole and get it out of there. All the assembly is out and on the floor. Next, I'm going to use a spring compressor, compress this, and loosen the nuts on the top of that in order to get the spring off of this assembly. The spring has been compressed. Now this 17mm nut right here will be taken off, and then this top plate will be removed, and then you can slide your strut out through the bottom or just slide your spring up. Having air would make this job a lot easier with an impact gun. Okay, remove nut. Remove this sleeve, remove this cap. Just lay things in order as you disassemble them, so you wouldn't have any issue reassembling them. Then this buffer that goes along with the dust cover. Okay, on top of that is a special washer, which is a locking washer. I will show you how that operates. Okay, this is the washer. There's a step on the inside of this hole. This side is different from this side. So do not put this on this way. That little groove on the inside here must go on onto here like this on the new one, because there's a little clip right here that locks onto onto that and will prevent this going any further down. Okay? So remember to put that on as you take it off. Inspect everything. Whatever job you're doing, take your time and inspect things and see what they're designed to do when you're taking them apart. Okay, this is everything disassembled and laid out in the order they came apart. Okay, there is your first nut over here, then the sleeve, then this cap, then the washer. This rubber piece right here fits over the strut, but you have to put this in first before you can put the strut on. You slide the strut in from this bottom end, because this end is smaller than this, and this will not fit in through this end. So you have to slide the strut up in there, and then you put these other pieces on. Now note, this piece right here have the imprint of the top of the spring. All right? Now this end must fit in this groove right here. All right? Then the rest of it will fall in place. There's a little groove with a stop on here. The end of this spring must go up in there. I will now reassemble the new strut and install it in the vehicle. The new strut comes compressed with this locking device on it. All you need to do is compress this and move that clip. As you can see, as I compressed it, that clip shifted, right? But I need my other hand in order to do it. Okay, I know I warned you about this piece, this washer. But in this case, we don't have to worry about it because the new strut came with a stop on here already. So you don't need to use this on the new strut. But you do need this plate right here, which the spring sits in, have to be installed on the new strut. So we're going to put that down in there. Sometimes it's a tight fit. This one seemed to be loose. It just sits down in there. All right. And some struts have this little plastic piece here that needs to go on top of there. This one doesn't seem to have one. I mean, you can take this off and see if it will work on here. If it will, fine. If it won't, don't worry about it. Like this one will not go over this bushing. I mean, this washer. So we're going to leave this off. All right. You have slit this strut up through the bottom. Hello. Put this on here. And then you replace this rubber piece that I told you about onto the spring and set it in correctly. And then the cap. And then the spacer. Then your nut, and tighten things down. Once you've done that, you can slide it up into the car. Sometimes this bushing will get stuck up in the car in the hole that the strut fits up through. Most times I don't bother to replace that bushing. I've never seen one really bad, and plus I don't like the design of the new ones. They're not, they don't fit on quite right. Okay, so I'm gonna leave this on here. Like I said, I've never had a problem with that top bushing. Not to say they can't go bad, but I just never encountered a problem. Now I'm gonna release this, the spring compressor, and this should be ready for installation. Assembly is ready for reinstallation. Just make sure you tighten this nut down before you release this spring. You don't want that spring to just fly off and you have a serious accident. Caution, never loosen this nut with the strut out of the car, the last nut, never loosen that without having a spring compressor already on the spring and the spring compressed. Okay, if you do that, like I said, that spring gonna fly apart and you have a serious accident. On your left is the old strut. Believe it or not, this strut is not good 2 years old. Try your best not to buy any of this cheap Japanese version. Over here we have the dust cover, as I call them. Some call them the accordion, and the boot that holds that on. And you need to replace this if it's all torn up, because that helps keep dirt and stuff from getting on this shaft, which could end up down in the strut and destroying the seal of the strut. This piece here is going to be reused, and we have a new bearing and bushing here. Over here is the new one. This is the bearing that fits inside of this and sits on top of the strut, right like that, when you're mounting it. This is the new dust cover. You install this by twisting this down into this hole and locking this lip right here into the groove. This groove right here. I usually spray a little lubricant. WD-40 will be good. That makes it helps for that to slide into that hole easily. Now, this here is the lockdown for the piston rod of the strut. It comes compressed. You want to decompress it and then take this piece of wire off that holds it. Once you press it down, it will come off. I'm showing you something on this old strut. See how easily it's compressed? If I just hold it up on its own weight, it extends very easily. It's not supposed to do that. On a new assembly, on a new strut or shock, you might try that when you push it in and pull it out. It might go in easy and come out easy one time. Second time and third time, it should get stiffer. Okay, that's a good test. Unlike the spring for the rear strut on these cars, the bottom is wider than the top. The rear struts is the reverse. Okay, so now I'm gonna slide this boot on over here. Now, what I said before about the compression of these struts, it depends on whether it's oil filled or gas filled. If it's gas, as soon as you remove that restraint from that wire, it will extend. Okay, and pushing it down is pretty stiff, and it comes up on its own. Boot and dust cover already installed. Now, the end of the spring right here is going to fit right in here. Okay, now I'm going to run this up with the impact gun and tighten this down. With the strut assembled, I'm going to put it up into the hole place this over the top. All of this is under the hood, which will be this hole right here. This will be placed on the top. Piston top of the strut is going to come up through this hole, and then I'll place this nut on it and torque it down. Strut is up in there. The new cap is on. Nut is on. I've only turned it a couple of revolutions just to hold the strut in place. Gonna go down bottom. I have placed the strut in the spindle here. I have to now install the 2 bolts, one here and one here. Now what you need to be careful with when you're taking this apart, right? This part here, right, where your brakes, this spindle, where it breaks and everything is attached to the axle, I did not disconnect. So if you can see the movement, I don't know if you can see the axle. The axle is going in and out. If you let it lean too much to the outside, that joint will come apart. The inner CV joint will come apart. So try not to, you can always get it back in. Try not to let it flip too far out. Okay? And then you slide this here, in here just like that. Nice and simple. Got your bolts through the hole. I'm going to try and do this with one hand if I can. But you get the idea. I'm not going to waste time showing you how to do it. It's very simple. Just line it up, line the holes up, run the 2 bolts through, put they're 18 millimeter. Put the nuts on the end and torque them down. There you go, the 2 nut and bolts are in. You need to torque them down. I was taught many, many decades ago, in tightening nuts and bolts, you want to tighten the nut, not the bolt. You hold the bolt in place and you turn the nut. Because for one, if you try turning the bolt will have what is known as a shear force, right? You're going to try to twist the bolt once it's tight. So you tighten the nut and only pull on the bolt instead of trying to twist it at the same time. With everything in place and tightened up, there's a little bracket right here that attaches the flex brake line to the strut, and on that bracket also you can put in and attach the wire for your ABS sensor, which plugs in right here. Okay? Now, the other strut had a bracket around here that both these ends fitted into. This one don't have it, so I'm just going to do the lower one. If need be, you can use plastic ties and tie this to the strut so it won't be flopping around. Okay? And everything's going to move in unison. You're not going to stretch anything out of place. All right?